Hi, Leonid. How are you?
Oh, well, fine. We're going on the next episode.
Okay, good. Yeah, last time we were speaking about the typical errors that parents make. So we were only able to talk about error number one.
Well, that's
And I was wondering if we could move on to another error, typical error that you see that parents make.
well. I guess you know, taking the longer road and putting into a bigger perspective is essential. But then we move it into the sort of next set of the bigger principles, right? So one first point was that well, you are very much a pioneer, right? And you are very much in the unknown situation. And fact
Mhm.
is that the first most sort of obvious mindset and setting that you would have is to try to rush the time. It's like you have the impression that, well, you are already too late, right? So you see, in Russian we have the expression that sort of reads something like this, that you are so late that the railway station has already left, right? So it's not just the train has left, but it's actually the railway station has gone as well. So that's the impression that you
That's
get.
really late.
Huh? Yeah.
That's really, really.
So this is very much the sensation that you have intrinsically from yourself, like, oh wow, the clock is ticking, we are that far and we are that late, right? So that's the impression, that's the total pressure that you get also from the medical, social, and so on community. Well, you have to rush, you have to rush, you have to stimulate, you have to do more. We are already missing this. If you don't do that, then something bad is going to happen, and so on and so forth. Right? So then, when you meet your friends and when you meet your family and anyone who is somehow connected, what is their first question? Or how is she or how is he doing, right? And what do they want to hear? They want to hear something easily digestible. They don't want to hear some nuances on, well, she's sort of changing the way how she mobilizes her lips and interacts, between the lips and the jaw movements and the slight, like mimic increases and so on and so forth, or some elements of the eye tracing or any kind of those, right? So you see, they want something massive. They want something that they can sort of proudly say in this sort of big thing. Oh wow, this is the achievement. Like she sits for 5 seconds, right? Or she has lifted the head and held it for, I don't know, 20
Yeah.
seconds. Or he has crawled 3 meters or something like this, right? So you see, they want something, in that very numerical and very advanced phase, and then kind of everybody would applaud you and say, hey, everything is great, right?
Yeah.
So you are a good parent.
Yeah, I understand that. For instance, with Rocio, she's almost 14 years old, and I'm very happy about her rehabilitation, how she has evolved and developed. And people ask me, okay, what is she doing? And my answer is, she's happy and comfortable with her own body. And they're like, that doesn't make any sense. What is she doing? She's being happy. And that's it. And that's a big milestone. But people are expecting function, bigger things, and I think that it's like the main source of frustrations.
So, and this is really one of the, probably before we move to the sort of labeling the very specific mistakes and in the mindsets, I think that what you're touching here is really the key. And, one friend of mine used to say, and I really sort of stuck with me, it's the phrase, who are we? Are we human beings or are we human doings?
Doers.
So, and that's really the fact, is that the first point to transcend this label of, like, all these labels of invalid and, disabled and special needs and so on and so on, which are kind of covered but still intrinsically being present there. And the best test for this is actually what you were saying. It's what are you seeing, what you are being at, and who are you being with, right? Are you being with a human being, or are you trying to get the human doing action, right? So what is the primary mindset there? What is the primary achievement there? So this is really
That's a
this is really the key.
very good point. I've never seen like that, like disabled and invalid. Those are all labels that are aiming for a human doer, not a human being. That's a basic
Absolutely.
mistake.
So, and this is really, it might sound overly whatever, philosophical, existential, or whatever, but this is something that you really also have to take, right? So it's in everyday life, we kind of divide everything comfortably. Okay, the existential questions, they kind of either belong to the, quiet moments when I can contemplate, or, whether if you are a person of faith, that belongs to the church days or whatever, right? So, meditation and prayer, but then, in everyday life, you just kind of try to keep the wheels spinning and try to achieve as much as possible, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the first points, that actually when you approach the situation with the child affected by cerebral palsy, especially the quadriplegic, or, some countries call it the tetraplegic condition, so this is really the first test. Who are you being with? Are you taking it as like you meet the human being, and as human beings we are all the same? And are you connecting to a human being? Are you helping that human being to be better, more comfortable, happier in their being? Or you are trying to externalize it and kind of to present the achievements to the external world via showing how great of a human doing this person is? And that's really one of the first, like, stepping stones on which everything, sits. And of course there could be tons of little kind of counter arguments. Well, but doing is essential for the personal satisfaction, and what happens if the person is doing nothing at all, and if we don't do anything, then maybe in X number of years, then the child is going to experience pains, troubles, and all sorts of the collapses, and so on. So all these are legitimate questions, but these questions belong to the second circle. So the first thing is that where are you meeting your child? Are you meeting your child as a human doing, or are you meeting your child as a human being? And that's really the key starting point from where everything else builds. And this is something which sounds, maybe to begin with, not inspirational enough, right? Not aspiring enough, not reaching far enough, right? Kind of, maybe it's, what is this? This is just telling us that accept how it is, and don't think big, or don't strive for more, all kind of these things. You see, that's really an illustration, like how treacherous is this path, right? So you see, you're so easy to overshoot, right? You just, it's always, that's the whole thing. It's always going into those pendulum swings. It's either you are going Paralympic, right, the hero, or you're a zero, like doing nothing, just kind of drifting, like just a driftwood, helpless, accepting the fate and all these things. So that's really the first point, is to the whole upbringing and life with the child with a quadriplegic condition and so on. It's a lot more. You have to put a magnifying lens in front of you, right? So it's like you need the special glasses, and those glasses has to come to your vision, to your hearing, to your hands, to your heart, to your guts, everywhere. You have to have the magnifying glasses to be able to meet the child and to see those signs of the development. Because if you are staying at the same distance and you're staying from the regular human contact and the regular human contact, between the parent and the child, you would see nothing. And you would completely miss all the important things in your child's development. You would completely miss the important opportunities for connecting and for becoming a different self. Right? So, and that's
Yeah.
another part, right? So you see that it's the other side of it is that it's not you are being the judge and the deliverer, right? So you see, for your child, that you are as you are, right? And the child is something like an object that has to change. So this is really a critical thing, is that to take it, to take, on the one hand, it's the magnifying glass, right? But on the other hand, it's also keeping the mirror and seeing that, well, it's a two-way street and it's you who has to change, right? So it's the evolution path for both of you, for meeting those, for meeting those together, and that's really the essential mindset to begin with. So, and I think that
I think
you can
you
actually comment on this, from your personal experiences, and because as every parent, you started from this same usual thing, right? So you see, trying to chase the doing.
absolutely yes, and there is everybody around you is trying to tell you to overstimulate. You feel guilty if you don't do 100 tasks per day, trying to stimulate your daughter in order for her to do more. It's your job to stimulate her, not to just leave her cool down, quiet, and happy. It's a different mindset altogether. But I think you describe very well with technical words. But for me, it's something I learned with Rocio, that it's unconditional love. I love her no matter what she does or doesn't. It's for who she is, and
Yeah,
that's the thing. She doesn't
absolutely,
need to do anything.
absolutely. But you see, I mean, you are absolutely right, right? So to take this whole first point of being, right? So you see the human being, and that's really the key point. The, it might sound like superfluous, but it is what it is, right? So it is the unconditional love, right? It's the pure form when you can share the silence, when you can share the same room, when she doesn't have to do anything. But the thing is, right, is that even for a healthy child, right, if you think about it, what are the most what are the deepest parenting moments? They're not when you talk to your child, right? It's those things when you can, like kiss them on the head, right? So when there's, even more so when a child, like when the child is asleep, being all relaxed and, like smiling when they're sleeping and so on. And then you kind of, as a parent, you sneak in and you have a chance to hold their hand. And that really is that moment that makes you experience it into a completely different connection, right? Or when a child gives you her hand and then you just hold it and you say, wow, this is really, a, you know, you can't explain it. It doesn't belong to words, right? It's just, but it's that deep, all-encompassing feel that actually makes the main reward of parenting. It's not, what they achieve and so on, but it's that deep connection that really makes sense out of all these things.
And in that sense, we're lucky.
Well, I guess that's a strong
Yeah, we
word, which,
have yeah, but we have more of those moments because we don't have the distractions of the action one. We get a lot of those quiet moments of hugging, of observation, of just seeing and touching each other. So that's a different way of seeing this special parenting.
absolutely. So that's would be, you know, I guess because you see, it's always like it's a very difficult like water to like to thread on, right? So you see, when you are not the parent yourself, and then like you're talking about things like this, that it's actually a component of the empowerment in that. There's a component of the deeper connection. You know, it's always like, you're not the parent, you don't know, and so on. But look, I believe that I've been in this field and lived through it for long enough, and day after day and year after year. So it's this observation, and that's what I can vouch for, right? So you see, my observation is that it's those parents who take this unconditional connection as the first and again unconditional starting point to which they can always return and reset. They are the ones who, paradoxically speaking, achieving the best quality of life and achieving the best potential for their child, whatever that potential is.
That's very interesting because there is like a fine line between aiming too high or like I'm doing nothing. You don't know what it's between. Am I putting a roof for her in her development, or am I trying to do everything for her? And you never know so surely where that line is.
Absolutely. So, and I think that that's what we're going to cover in our next episode, right? So, when we will talk about
Okay,
the troubles with what I call the Paralympic mindset.
perfect. Look forward for it.
Okay.
Bye.